Good morning. Freedom is a double-edged sword. So this past week with today's talk, I've probably given the talk about 20 times. So last night I was really clear I was going to anchor in on what I exactly wanted to say. And at 9:24 this morning, I just decided I'm just going to say whatever comes out. Because I keep changing it. So I believe in freedom, but I will look at my, because our clock, since the painting isn't working, so I will look at my watch because I don't want to just go on forever. And it could go in any direction, so we'll see. All right, I love it. Thank you. I don't even have to say anything. This is great. This is the best kind. So we're talking about, you got to have heart. We're talking about our beautiful, this is a symbol of our own bodies, our three bodies, causal body, energy body, physical body, the creative process, freedom. Jack was talking about freedom. So much of the spiritual literature and the practices are to get us to a place where we are living in freedom, where we are free of all baggage, all the stuff, that we can let go of anything that limits us so we can be this incredible, infinite transparency of pure spirit, that we walk around as lighthouses, as shining this purity of light, of peace, of joy, of harmony, of grace. In many ways, the New Thought teaching also is in alignment with this idea. The New Thought, this really symbolizes the New Thought teaching. So last week we were talking about at the causal level we have an idea like freedom, beauty, harmony, grace, where there is no opposite. And we start holding to this causal idea that really is beyond thought, beyond any form or image. But as we hold to that idea, and one reason why we do affirmations is that repetition. We're holding to that idea till this energy starts to swirl. And that's our middle part we're going to be talking mostly about today, is the subtle body, our energy body. And that energy starts to swirl around the idea, and it swirls and it swirls and it swirls, and it gets denser and denser and denser until finally it pops. We have our big bang into the physical world, and the big bang of the cosmos, and the big bang in our own individual life when we were birthed into form. And every time in our life when we tap into that causal realm and we allow it to create anew within us, there's a moment where something shifts and we have new life. So last week we were talking about how empowering this is. We move from a victim state of consciousness where the conditions and circumstances of people run us to an empowered where we can choose. We can make a choice for health and for wholeness and for relationship and for prosperity and abundance. And in holding that, we can create a new physical life. Now, it's important to recognize that this is a descension, what is called a descension spirituality. What that means is that, in fact, our focus and our goal, so for this down here is the, do we have it up there? No. This down here is the physical, the form. Our goal is to have the kind of form, the physical life that we want, that we don't have to be imprisoned in this physical realm. So we continue to move to the causal realm, but at least a lot of my experience in New Thought is a lot of the reasons why we move to the causal realm is so we can bring in a different physical life. So in some way, the physical realm is still our main goal. Descension spirituality, the main goal is the physical, which is great, essential, and needed. This is one of the things as we go on this spiritual journey, and my hope in addressing all of this is to get rid of better and worse, higher and lower, and recognize that all of it is essential and part of our journey, that we are all of it, and we want to be engaged in all of it, not just in some parts, or not say some parts are better than others. So that's an incredibly important part, and I'm so grateful the New Thought teaching is in this world and doing incredible work. One of the ways the New Thought teaching is evolving is it initially was about yourself, how to shift things in your own life to get the kind of life that makes sense to you, and now that intention shifting or expanding to say, I want that good for everybody. Social justice, systemic changes that need to happen, there's a lot more, our vision for not just the Centers for Spiritual Living, but I'm seeing that vision pop up in spiritual progressive worlds everywhere as a world that works for everyone. So the idea is it's moving around, we're evolving just beyond our own immediate good and say, I want this good for everybody, for all living beings on this planet, which is beautiful and wonderful. I also found in my own life where I did have a nice life growing up in terms of I safe, protected, had all my needs met in abundance. So then I went to service. All my jobs in my adult life were service-oriented, worked in a nursing home, halfway home for juvenile offenders, psychiatric hospital. And it was really in working at the psychiatric hospital, and I just loved the work. I love being of service. But it was the first time it dawned on me that deep down I felt if I just kept working, all the problems would go away. Like there was an end point to the pain and to the suffering. And it finally dawned on me there is no end point. That as long as we are in the physical realm, we are in duality, and we may fix one change or even evolve beyond it, but then another problem shows up. It's duality that's causing the suffering. The duality is different stories and different names, but it's a lot of the problem. And that in fact, if we really want to shift away from suffering, one of the most important ways to do that is to wake up to our spiritual self. And so that was what we call ascension spirituality, where the goal is a little different. The goal, and to use goals, because again, both and. So additionally, it's the idea to wake up to these different states of consciousness where we can find greater freedom from duality, where that suffering can start to dissolve. We do not need to suffer. We do not need to suffer, right? So in this causal realm that we were talking about last week, there's no form, there's no idea, it's pure. And there's no opposite. It's always good where there's no opposite. So what I've discovered in reading much mysticism, practicing different mystics, is the goal often was to get either to the causal realm, which is called formless mysticism, or the non-dual realm. That was the intention. Not the intention, it actually becomes a reality. And so I practiced. I have different teachers. If you notice who your teachers are, last week we were talking about books that really radiate with you. A lot of times the books have teachers behind it. So what are the teachers teaching you? Where are you radiating from? Well, the teachers that I were having were meditation teachers. Shunryu Suzuki was a big one for non-duality. Causal was mindfulness meditation. Reverend Michael Beckwith down at Agape was my main teacher for that. Jack Kornfield does, well, a lot of people do mindfulness meditation. But what I was discovering something, I could get into those states, a non-dual state, I could get into the causal states. For some reason it resonates with me, so I could shift into it fairly easily. I would feel this incredible, the vastness, just no longer just the limited body identity and the vastness of being and the joy and the freedom. But the thing that I wasn't experiencing was fulfillment. And I remember years ago when I was in a relationship in the 90s, I would recognize that I would feel all this freedom until I was in a relationship. And as soon as I was in a relationship, I began to care. And with the caring came attachment and resistance. And so I couldn't figure out how to feel deeply intimate, deeply passionate, and connected with a person and free. Because the moment I felt really connected to someone, I felt like I lost my freedom. And they were fighting each other. And so years later, when I read integral philosopher Ken Wilber talking about that what we want is... I'm sorry, can you close the door? I know there's going to be a waft of cold air coming in. That what we want is actually freedom and fulfillment. And that was a light bulb that went off. Because I was experiencing the freedom from these various meditation practices, from these various spiritual states, but I wasn't experiencing fulfillment. So in thinking about this middle part, This is easier to talk about. That's why I could come up with so much to talk about, because now there's images, now there's ideas, now there's symbolism, now there's experiences with deities. Our dream state is a mirror of what this subtle energy is. We all have an energy body. So how many of you are aware of dreams that you have? Maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time you're aware. So most of you are. Have any of you had the experience of waking up inside a dream and then being able to shift what's happening in the dream? Us controlling types can do that, right? I do not like this. I am moving it around. So we can do that. Now, I'm reticent to say that anything that I experience is a universal or absolute truth, but I would venture to say that many people who have, by the way, anyone can do that. It's just intention. Before you go to bed, every night to set the intention to wake up in your dream. And if you write dreams when you wake up in the morning, just all that participation in your dream life, you'll start actively participating in your own dreams. Again, us controlling people like to do that. No, I'm just kidding. But what I experienced in my venture, I would venture to believe that many other people also experience this, is I don't come across resistance. When I'm in the dream and I want to change something, the dream doesn't talk back to me and say, no, I'm not going to do that. It shifts. And it shifts easily and effortlessly. It's energy. That change in the physical realm can be very difficult. It impacts everybody. Change a job, change where you're living. You have to do all sorts of things. It's hard. In the energy world, in your dream life, as we all know, even when you're not doing it yourself, it can change dramatically moment to moment. You're in different locations, you're wearing different things, you're with different people, and it all can be in the same dream, right? So I'm sorry, that door is a lot of a lot of worlds. So with the dreams, we can shift. And this is where the idea of the law comes around. I mean, I'm sure many of you heard the law of attraction, law of mental equivalence. We talk a lot about the law, and people think that New Thought is about the law. It's not really about the law. It's really about, if you really read New Thought, it's really about hanging up here at the causal. But the idea is this energy is very responsive. Very responsive. So when we start placing a new intention into this energy field, it responds, and it responds immediately. That's what we can learn from our dreams, how this energy works. So this is the idea of how new life comes about. We start thinking a new thought, we want a new idea, and this energy world where it's not all stuck in the physical can start shifting and create a new reality. So this is how I've understood the law. In the descension, it's something to respond to what I want to get down here. And then in my ascension, spiritual masters and teachers would say all the time, don't get stuck here. This is the realm of the psychic energy. Don't get caught up in phenomenal existence. Phenomenal is, when we talk about mystical experiences, usually we're talking about there. If you're seeing lights, if you're seeing other beings of entities, generally when we describe a mystical experience, what we're describing is a subtle body experience because it's really cool. Whether it's sound, whether it's a feeling tone, whether it's a communication with another being, it's happening there. And what many of the mystics say is, don't get caught there. You want to keep moving up into the causal. So this was the bias that I've had on my spiritual journey, that the causal is really where I want to hang out. And I want to not spend time in that middle because that's dangerous and can sidetrack me. That there's a goal, and that's to get to the causal, or get the physical that I want, but you want to just sort of bypass that whole middle part. And as I was being with the part of feeling, I know the freedom, but I don't know the fulfillment, I started to recognize the fulfillment comes from this middle part. That is the place where there's so much soul and so much depth. How many of you have watched Bill Moyer's series with Joseph Campbell, The Powers of Myth? So about half of you have. And then, so Joseph Campbell, for those of you who don't know, works a lot with mythology. Carl Jung, how many of you have read Carl Jung? So you all know that what they're dealing with. So Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell knew about the causal, but what really excited them was this middle part, because why? Because there's the symbology, the images that come have so much depth and so much richness. They can bring us to tears. It makes us start to feel things that we don't feel. The causal, it's hard to talk about, it's hard to communicate with other people, there's no images, there's no sound. I mean, how do you talk about it? But as soon as you get here, you can feel the spiritual import, but it's more than just words. Images are incredibly powerful. So in our spiritual journey, what I'm inviting us into is freedom and fulfillment, to let go of a goal-oriented spirituality. That's what we heard in the reading. A goal-oriented is I'm going to shine the light, I'm going to be free, I'm going to be unlimited, but we miss the mystery. We miss the nuance. We miss the stories that are hidden. And every one of us responds to it. We feel that, when you were reading about the candlelight and looking at these candles, and I was just picturing being in a cave with the candlelight sparkling, that mysteries are being revealed, something that you can't see in normal everyday light. We tend to think about this purpose of the spiritual journey physically is just to get the answer we want. It's like a divine ATM machine. But I don't think that's what our spiritual journey is about, or it may be an aspect of it. The spiritual journey is about depth and richness and fullness. And that doesn't come from a linear path and says, this is where I'm going, and it comes from the sidetracks. It comes from the places that you didn't expect to go. The pain and the suffering that starts to show up, there are gifts in that. There are incredible richness and experiences that you would never know or feel into if you hadn't experienced those particular difficulties. I have never met a human being walking this earth who hasn't had these incredibly deep and profound experiences through the things that went wrong. What's interesting that's happening in the world today, I've been listening to some of the California Institute of Integral Studies podcasts, just a few of them. What's interesting as I scroll through they have about 5 years. They do it every week, so it's a ton of podcasts. It's amazing how many of these podcasts are becoming more and more about psychedelics. Psychedelics are making their way back. Michael Pollan from Berkeley just wrote a book a couple years ago on psychedelics, the power of psychedelics. Now, I've never used psychedelics. I'm not someone who uses drugs. I'm not against it, just not my thing. But I do find it utterly fascinating. And what they're finding, Ram Dass, his whole entryway into his spirituality was through psychedelics. What got me interested in it recently was listening to, there's a healing institute in Costa Rica where people who want to have a healing of some kind go down and they take a psychedelic. It's all very mediated. You have someone there guiding you through it who is not on a psychedelic. And the gentleman who started it was someone who was dealing with addiction for about 20 or 30 years in his life. He told the story. He's just dealing with a lot of trauma, and could never quite break it. He would break it and then go back. And he went down and he had, I don't know which psychedelic it was. He took one psychedelic, and in it, he started communing and having this whole relationship with this giant moon. And I believe there was something else. So again, we're in this subtle world. It doesn't operate the way this world operates. And in this interaction, in this short period relative to his whole life, when he came back into his normal state, he said the addiction was completely gone, something he'd been spent 20 or 30 years, therapy programs, no desire, the whole habit pattern, everything was gone, obliterated. I was done. And it wasn't even an issue. It was like it didn't even exist anymore. And he said, if connecting with this realm, with the symbols and the images and the mythology that realm could have such a profound impact on himself, on his own healing, that's why he started the Healing Institute. And that's why I think more and more people are talking about how the power of psychedelics, because what psychedelics do to our very often linear, dense, rational mind that is very concrete in this physical form is it opens up the gateway. and allows us, there's so much more out there. There's so much more out there that we get to play with and dance with and get out of our sense of linear, better or worse, or this is the way it should be or shouldn't be, and play with all of it. I was listening to a gentleman just yesterday. His name is Nicholas Powers. He's a professor, African American. He was raised by an activist mom, single activist mom, and he said her stories of the counterculture were his bedtime stories. And he still is an activist, and just you can hear the creativity, and he's also a professor of literature. And he was talking about his first experience. He went to Burning Man, and he was talking about his first experience on a psychedelic. And he said it was an extraordinary experience, but it was an experience that made him sad. Because in that experience, he experienced no racism. And he hadn't realized the density of how much racism impacted him every day. He grew up in New York City, but wherever you grow up, it carried this weight that he carried with him every day. And the moment he shifted into this dream world where things could shift and there was a greater possibility, he saw that possibility. And so he started a People of Color tent at Burning Man, and he tells these amazing stories of working, because and he still is an activist every day. He was telling about one thing after another that he does. So he's very active in shifting this world, but at the same time dances in the reality, in that dream reality, that this doesn't have to exist, that we can live, that there's a possibility of no racism, that he in his own being has experienced no racism. And what I love about that is, again, it's not just our own individual selves. He was talking about how do we bridge what we're experiencing on this imagery level into the physical form. And I don't think it's linear. See, the thing about the empowering state is it's sort of a linear thing. I decide I want this, I'm going to get it, and I get it. But we miss the mystery, we miss the unfolding. So the next stage of that Reverend Michael talks about after empowering by me, talks about through me. And through me is about allowing this divine energy to move through us without trying to dictate how it's showing up. What I found from lucid dreaming, and which is why I do not do it anymore, is it was empty for me. I could change things around and get it the way my small self wanted it to go, that made it comfortable, but I was missing the meaning, I was missing the guidance, I was missing the depth of why that image was showing up in my life in the first place. I just completely obliterated that to fix it and to sterilize everything, to make it comfortable. But it's also in that discomfort, in that lack of knowing, that we start to find a mystery and a depth that we can't find anywhere else, and that I was hungering for, and that I think all of us are hungering for, that we're not just looking for freedom, we're looking for fulfillment. The reason why Martin Luther King activates us is because when we listen to that I have a dream speech, you just can't listen to that and be moved. He's moved by something, his vision, his dream. Not his thoughts, his dream and he creates an image for it, and it just opens all of our hearts. And that dream is not yet a reality, but it's that same dream that Nicholas Power experienced when he was on psychedelics, that there can be a world where there is no racism, where black and white children live together. We feel the power of that, and the more we allow ourselves to let these dreams guide us, to let these dreams speak to us, to teach us, the more we bring it into our everyday life. The more we allow it. We don't force it. We don't make something happen. We choose to allow it to move through us and to teach us and to guide us. Not to get to an end goal, but to teach us in the depths and the mystery of our own soul, of who we are. I have a brother who I've talked about, George, and he was a born leader. Meaning he always wanted to be a leader. He always wanted to run the world. And he is just a tiny bit, and he was very happy. It was very hard for me to accept leadership for me, having him because he is a role model for someone who is an excellent leader. And I as a young kid, I tried to emulate him. I knew I couldn't be like him. And I thought, well, if he's what the example is of what a great leader is, and I am a completely different personality, I always thought the divine presence, when it gave me this vision of being a minister, it was a little confused. And I kept trying to tell it that it was wrong. And it didn't understand that George is supposed to be the leader and I'm supposed to be the support person. I'm a very good support person. I like to see people and cheer them on. I didn't necessarily want to be the one out in the open. I feel uncomfortable in that role. And one of the wonderful healing moments was when I had the surgery and I was on the other side of the veil. I was talking about the no comparison, that there's nothing to measure. This whole idea of measuring and comparison and better, it does not exist in these other worlds, in the subtle world and the cultural world. It's a very human thing to do. And I finally understood on a much deeper level that this call to be a minister isn't about achieving some linear idea of what it means to be a leader. It's a soul growth for me, for the people who I'm in contact with, this community. We're all growing together into a depth and a richness of life that isn't linear. It isn't like, here's my goal and I'm going to make it happen. It's an allowing of Spirit to guide us and teach each and every one of us on this journey, to allow us the mistakes, to what we call mistakes but are incredible gifts, that teach us more about who we are in our soul. You know, I had a boyfriend once who took me to a horror movie. I never go to horror movies, and I didn't realize it was a horror movie. This was back in the 90s. It was something like Children Under the Stairs, or I don't even remember what it was, but I do know this. I strangely was not afraid when I saw it, because as I watched it, I thought, I have that. I have little hidden people underneath who are trying to get out, and I started... Sounds weird.
And you have to take psychedelics.
That's why I don't take them. I'm already nuts. I'll go off the deep end. And so I started having dreams about all these hidden parts of me that they were banging on the door to get out and wanted to be seen. The images are here to tell us and to guide us into this richness and this depth that fills us in a way that just pure light can't yet. Maybe when we're at that level. I'm not in any hurry. I figure the calls will be there waiting for me when I'm ready. I want to play around. As long as we are in the physical body, we have these three bodies and the non-duality. Let's play in all of them, and let's give them all their full sway. Now, I've met people who only live at this place. So I actually started with Carl Jung. I took classes in the collective unconscious, and this is, I took it in when I was living in D.C., and when I was just there, I was missing the other stuff. I was missing the causal and the non-dual. So that's when I started discovering it, and that's why I love this symbol so much, and that's why I teach it to all of us, because we need all of it, and we tend to, at different times in our life, resonate with different practices and others, because we need it, and it's to honor it. And when people say, I give it to God, or all the language that we use for God, I think when I'm listening to people, the problem with God is nobody knows what you're talking about. There's so many different things that could mean. And so for us on our journey, we are the CEOs of our own journey. We are the chief executive officers of our own spiritual journey, and we can't be if we don't know what we're doing. So that why I love this symbol is it teaches us who we are, who our teachers are, where we're guided to, and to accept all of it. And if I'm in one area and someone else, so if I'm really into that middle part, learning the symbolism, and so visioning is very much about opening to symbols and images and letting them speak to you. But someone else is wanting to just bliss out in pure being, that it's not better or worse. We just start celebrating each other's paths and understanding them. It's not like my path is better than you or more evolved. It's the delight in the uniqueness of it, and knowing that even if someone's blissing out in non-duality, that I could have that too. It's not my path and your path. We're actually all doing the same thing, just at different times in different ways. And that's the beauty and the richness of the collective journey, is to feel the richness of all of our journey. Oh, yikes, okay. I think I just want to end with a story, and I probably wouldn't end with this story on any other occasion, but since it's Julian's birthday, I'm going to end with it. Yeah, he's at camp. Because it shows sometimes how imagery can be really powerful, but we don't always know what it means. So when I was in ministerial school, my friend and I used to vision every Saturday night, unless we had dates. Then we can miss it for dates, but we didn't have too many dates, so we visioned a lot. And I kept getting for months images of cowgirls, of a cowgirl. I was a cowgirl, and I don't ride, well, when I was a kid I rode horses, but nothing Western style, and I couldn't figure it out. Am I supposed to literally be a cowgirl? What does that mean? And I didn't understand it. But it was so unrelenting, cowgirl, cowgirl, cowgirl. And the vision we were both in ministerial schools, was the vision for ministry, and I couldn't figure out what cowgirl meant. So finally, so just skip a few years later, Julian's born. He's not walking yet, he's crawling. And Jack and I are visioning for what's the vision for Julian's life. And one of the things that I have to say this because it's so important. Imagery, icons speak to us, the divine, not the actual physical form, but what they represent. And the other reason why I like that reading today is because it's not when you look at, if you go to a statue and you start praying to it, help me, help me. I rarely have experiences that way, but I'm amazed how many experiences I've had almost in passing. Like a year ago when I was talking about seeing St. Francis of Assisi over here, that statue right next to St. Bart's, and there used to be a labyrinth there. I don't know St. Francis that well. I see the statue. I know he's a beautiful being. I give him the nod. How you doing, St. Francis? And then I start walking on the labyrinth, and he starts speaking to me. A few weeks ago, glorious icon of Mother Mary, an icon I only moderately think is attractive, nothing personal. I'm just saying I wasn't naturally attracted to it. I had a very restless meditation. I wasn't in any deep meditation. I opened my eyes, I'm staring at, and suddenly she's speaking to me. So my point is, with visioning, when we vision, I think what I hear people say all the time is, I don't get anything. And I think what we're looking for is a very linear, here's your answer, this is what you're going to do, I'm going to give you a vision, go for it. That's not how I experience it working. It is sort of off on the periphery. You have to catch it. It's like flying by an image or a sensibility, and yet when you're looking at it directly, you don't see it. It's off on the side a little. Anyways, I'm visioning for Julian. Jack and I are visioning for what's God's vision for Julian's life. No, I don't think I have much attachment. And the reason why I was talking about imagery is because I was never been drawn to Native American imagery. I don't feel any resonance with it, and yet I dated someone who took me on shamanic journeys. It's amazing how much it impacted me, and so that's why I want to say imagery is so important, whether you feel drawn to it, whether you know the culture around it, know your religion, open yourselves. Anytime you get connected with imagery, sacred imagery, give it a guy nod. Open yourselves to it because it teaches. So when I vision, for whatever reason now, the Native American music comes, I go down into the earth, I'm with teachers, we're sitting in a circle, and now I know I'm in the subtle realm. And as I'm there, these two gentlemen, John and Jason Garrett, come, and John Garrett's very assertive with Jack and I, and Julian's there in the middle. And I can't remember, I wrote it all down, but he gave us different imageries. But basically it was a sense of Julian needs to play football. He can't even walk yet. And one of the images he gives us is a star. Now, it was important because I come from a soccer family, a passionate soccer family, and I personally was against football, so I was the one he had to work on the most in this visioning, because it's something that I would have never been open to. After the vision, these are two gentlemen that went to school with my brother Rob. I call up my brother Rob. I said, whatever happened to John and Jason Garrett? And at the time, it turns out they were both coaching for the Dallas Cowboys, whose symbol is a star, which is what John was giving Julian. So of course I'm going to let Julian play football. To this day, I don't know why that is important. But I will say this. He got a cowboy, I got a cowgirl. My board president, who's holding vigil over there, our board president, is a cowgirl, definite cowgirl. We're in cowgirl country. Julian goes to a high school that's called the Cowboys, and he's playing on a football team for the Livermore High School Cowboys. I couldn't have planned that. I didn't go on a linear direction and say, how am I going to work in cowgirl and cowboy into my life? But by allowing these symbols to become alive, to say yes to them, and to the extent that I could, so I knew to say yes. When Julian in second grade, all his friends were playing soccer, and he insisted on playing football, and it made no sense to me. I let him because of the vision. I let the vision guide me. And he's playing it now. And to this day, I'm like, it's not about a career. That's the linear thinking. There's something he's getting for his soul that I don't know. It's none of my business. All I know is that he is supposed to be playing on this football team of the Livermore Cowboys, and it's feeding him in a way that nothing else could have. And it was important enough for me to be shown this in the vision. That's how visioning works. It's not always about, here's your career, here's how you're going to make your money, here's your relationship. It's giving us our soul fulfillment in ways that we don't even know that we need, and we start to trust it. We allow it to teach us and to guide us. And when we do, and it takes us on a long journey, I have never had a vision that I've ever been able to fulfill in a short period of time. It's taken years because there's so much stuff at that subtle level, so many patterns that I have to work through, so many... I can't even explain it. It's just something in the energy field that has to be worked through to be able to integrate this vision. It's not something that happens in a hurry. Thomas More, who wrote Care of the Soul, spirit moves quickly, soul moves slowly. Spirit knows something instantly. Soul has to work it all through in its energy and its field and then out in the world. And when we start remembering that this is what life is about, the old cliche, it's about a journey, not a destination. Our spiritual journey is about freedom and fulfillment. My invitation to you this week and always is to allow your experience to feel the soulfulness of your own story. What is your story? Because your story has soul. Your story is soulful, is profound. I've told you before, I've been asked to write up my autobiography, and it's not about writing the story. I've learned that very quickly. I know my story. I can tell my story in 2 seconds. It's not about that. What I'm discovering in the process, it's the process of writing it, this richness. There are times where I can't move. The tears are, I'm just crying from things I can't even explain why I'm crying. In the process of writing it out, there's joy, there's like amazement, there's wonder. And that's every one of us. We are all this extraordinary, soulful, profound, deep, mysterious, mystical, magical story that needs to be told. And the only person who can tell it is you. That you have a beautiful story to tell, and that is absolutely essential to your spiritual journey, is this soulful energy, mythology story, and it includes all of it. Everything that's happened to you ever. There's nothing that is excluded in the story. You with me? Yeah. All right, well, let's pray then. Let's pray together. And how wonderful it is to acknowledge with words and thoughts and concepts that which is beyond words, thoughts, and concepts. And even though it is beyond words, thoughts, and concepts, it is as more real than anything else. It is closer to us than our very breath. This infinite power of love, this infinite power of grace, this infinite power of health, of wholeness, of beauty, of harmony, of peace. It animates and activates this divine, beautiful being that each and every one of us is, that we are all made in the image and likeness of this purity of pure being. Where there is no opposite, where there is no duality, where there is no other, there is just one life, one good, one joy, one harmony. And it is here that we meet. We collectively meet in our oneness and the I amness of our beingness. And how grateful I am that we get to meet in this depth and this transcendent self. That we don't have to make it happen. We don't have to fix anything to make it happen. It is fully alive and awake as each and every one of us right here and right now. And as we allow and feel into this purity of being, we allow its uniqueness, its beautiful, grace-filled story that has called itself into being through each and every one of us that is here today, that could hear my voice. This divine essence, this divine presence has called each and every one of us to fully inhabit all of our life. That we give thanks from the moment we are birthed to now and to all that is unfolding, that which we call good and that which we call bad, that which has been transcendent, that which has been full of energy, and that which is fully dense in this physical world. We accept and claim all of it. We allow this divine idea to continue to grow us, to continue to teach us, and through the mysteries of the stories of our life, we allow ourselves to be surprised and in awe. We allow ourselves to cry and to laugh. We allow ourselves to feel deeply into the magnificent beings that each and every one of us is. We allow ourselves to feel into the beauty and the harmony that is showing up in ways that humanly we could never imagine, and yet there it is, in the mythology that creates our life, in the beautiful images that activate our inner world, that are peppered throughout our language and how we talk with one another, how we share who and what we are with each other, how we serve one another, how we give support and celebrate our neighbors here in this room, our neighbors in this country, and our neighbors in this world. This divine energy and this divine mythology of our life, the stories that animate the religions and the cultures, the genders, the sexual orientations, all the various wonderful storylines that are alive and activated on this planet Earth right here and right now, some with deep pain and suffering and some with great joy, and most of them with both. We allow our hearts to open and soften and allow all of that story in. We allow ourselves to feel into the magnificence and the power of it. We allow ourselves to be completely filled to overflowing with the beauty and the magnificence of spirit in this energy world that we are surrounded and folded in. We know that this energy world, these divine beings, these divine teachers are alive and awake in our life right here and right now. We are allowing ourselves to be guided and directed and taught, not towards a goal, but for the depth and the richness of our own unfoldment. I give thanks for each one of us here. I give thanks for Alan Gardner, who is going through a healing challenge that right where he is, the power and the presence is activated of health and wholeness in his life. We give thanks for our beautiful Michelle and Carl, who we haven't seen for so long, and yet they've been in our hearts every step of the way. We celebrate their journey exactly as it is, knowing it has been absolutely beautiful, mysterious, and yet absolutely divine in every single detail. And that the fact that they're here today, that we can love them and celebrate them, and knowing that they are here with us and celebrating us as we celebrate them, that this divine circulation of love and support is endless and infinite. We give thanks for anyone in our life who is going through challenges, who those challenges are separating them from their divine essence. Knowing that those challenges are absolutely a gift when we allow our hearts to soften towards it, when we allow our mind to see in ways that we could never imagine. We allow the images of this divine world, of the subtle energy that surrounds and enfolds us, to become alive and awake as all of us. We allow the dreams to become activated through our conscious awareness. We allow dreams to open to us possibilities that in our human form we would never think is possible. We allow the dreams to teach us and to guide us and to heal us, and that is all happening right here, right now, in, through, and as each and every one of us in the infinite consciousness that all of us are and are celebrated now. And for all of this good, for all of this beauty and harmony and peace and fulfillment that is happening in this moment, I just say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, God, into the infinite wellspring of pure spirit. We release this word, we let it be, and we say together as one. And so it is. Amen and amen.
And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. Amen. 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 And so it is. Amen.
Amen and amen.